Hi, I'm Wayne Tuttle, and this is Chasing Legends. Welcome back to Chasing Legends. I'm Wayne Tuttle, your host once again. Please hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave a comment, like us. No matter what, check out our website, www.legendthesuperstitionmountain.com. All kinds of stuff there and kind of links into other things. That being said and done, let's get to today's story, or this week's story, as it might be. This is a bit different. It's not our normal treasure story, but it is kind of a story about a possible something that would benefit people. It goes back to 1977 and a murder of a woman named Marjorie Jackson. She was an heiress. Marjorie Jackson had married a gentleman whose name was Chester Jackson. He was the owner or the heir of Standard grocery stores back in Indiana. His father had been murdered. He ended up inheriting the business, and he expanded it to 250 stores. And around 1952, he sells the entirety of the stores out to the National Tea Company. He rakes in and invests about $14 million at the time and builds his wealth up at that time to about 25 million, and that current monetary situation does very, very well. Him and Marjorie, they have some family, nephews and nieces that come by and visit and so forth, but he's a very distrusting person. He likes to keep his cash at the house. He doesn't trust the public. He doesn't trust the IRS. But in 1970 he passes away and Marjorie's left widowed, and it affects her a great deal. She lives in the very nice house, a very affluent neighborhood, but she starts to let the house go to waste, doesn't take care of the landscaping, becomes very overly religious. She's seen out front. She'll yell epithets, racial epithets at people. She's always in prayer, and she likes to talk to animals. She also owned two Cadillacs. She had two Cadillacs. They were brand new, but she never drove them. She had two in case one would break down, but she never was licensed to drive. So a bit eccentric, obviously, well-known eccentric in the town. They believe her wealth was about 25 million at the time. Around 1975-76, a bank teller actually embezzles over $700,000 from Marjorie's accounts. The individual is caught. He is sentenced to 10 years in prison, and the money's brought back. But this begins to bother Marjorie. Now, the neighbors say, the few that talked to her said she was nice. She was very reclusive, very odd. She had certain ritualistic things, possibly. The neighbors say she was nice, but she was reclusive. She had ritualistic things she did. And they said she never went to church, but she was very overtly religious, would quote scripture and stuff, stand in front of her yard and house. 1976, two young teenagers in the neighborhood, because they know that rich, elderly, crazy lady lives there, break in and steal something like $700,000-800,000 from her. They actually steal jewelry and other things, but they throw the jewelry out the car window, and much like teenagers, they brag to all their friends and they get caught. The police apprehend them, but Marjorie refuses to press charges. They've been caught. The money's brought back to her. She says it's what God willed. She doesn't see any reason to do that. Because of the account, though, the police go to the house and try to tell Marjorie, hey, you really need to put the money in the bank or get a safe, do something with your money. And Marjorie meets them in the driveway with a gun and in a nightgown and tells the police to leave her alone. God will watch over her. She's fine. They need to stay out of her business. No harm was done, and so forth and so on. Well, May of 1977, May 2nd, a pair of individuals, Howard Willard and a man named Manuel Robinson, They are both two guys around town, and they realize, know the stories of Marjorie, and they decide they're going to break into her house and rob her. They go to the house, and they actually do really well, get about $1 million out of the house. And they leave and start spending the money and hanging around the bank and stuff, or hanging around town at taverns and bars and stuff. And people note this and all, but they're not caught. After 4 or 5 days, they decide they might as well go back and get more. So they return to her house. They break into the house, but Marjorie this time confronts them. They see Marjorie. Willard has a .22 caliber rifle and shoots her in the abdomen. Marjorie hits the floor and does perish from the wound. The two men then continue on, and it's unknown at this time whether it was $5 or $6 million, but they go around the house, keep finding money everywhere. In drawers, in trash cans, in garbage bags, their boxes. They're just going in and finding hundreds of thousands of dollars of cash. So they load up on the cash. They flee, go again, celebrate at bars, telling people, oh, look what we've done. Well, after a few days, they're getting ready to leave town. Willard's leaving town with his girlfriend. He tells her, I got to run back into town real quick to help Robinson out because there's some unfinished business. Robinson believes his fingerprints are in the house. They need to do something to kind of wash the place. So they get back to the house, and they decide to get a Mopar gas can. They douse gas in one of the rooms, and they ignite the room. Unfortunately, the fire, while it burns one room pretty badly, it mainly smolders, even though they used an accelerant. The fire department's called to the scene. The front gates and everything are chain locked. They can't get through, but they find in the back a chain link fence has been cut through, and they find the back door has been pried open. They get inside. There's a small fire. They put it out and find Marjorie dead of gunshot wounds. They start to go through the house, take inventory of what's there. Marjorie's obviously pronounced dead and taken to the coroners. Her nephew comes and identifies the body, as well as they have to have him sit at the sheriff's office in a cell with the money overnight, because as they walk around the house, they find gift boxes that say, to God for Marjorie, and these gift boxes are full of cash. There's cash in trash cans, cash in toolboxes. It's just stuck everywhere. They figure they find $4 or $5 million worth of money. Now, obviously, Marjorie had went to the bank, and what had happened is because of the embezzlement and the other robberies, she had been withdrawing millions of dollars at a time in suitcases and grocery bags and taking it home and hiding it. So the police are going through everything. They don't really know what to think. They would have probably never caught anyone if they hadn't started the fire, which is funny because the fire alerted them to that. It might have been months before they found out anybody realized Marjorie was dead. They start looking around, and they put out the APBs everywhere. It's like, someone's spending a huge amount of cash and all. Robinson's the first one that's kind of caught. He buys a new car, and unfortunately, because of these huge transfers, and the bank was worried, they kept the sequence of the bills. And a bunch of the bills were used. They end up finding $1.6 million in a suitcase underneath Robinson's bed at his apartment. His claim is he met some guy, he can't remember his name, and the guy just gave him $1.6 million. The police, however, do not believe this. So Robinson ends up going into custody, but they don't have the other guy. And then something turns up. There's a couple in Tempe, Arizona. They have went and they tried to buy an RV. They end up buying 2 used RVs for about $50,000 in cash. A number of the bills show up from the sequential bills that Marjorie had had. So the police and the FBI come to Phoenix to follow up with these individuals. They're staying at the Safari Motor Park in North Phoenix. The RV's parked there. The FBI go in. They go to check and see what's going on. Start to question them about the vehicles and so forth. The people are being kind of cagey. They go around, they search, and they find more money, another $1 million in cash laying around. Find out more sequential bills after the fact. They finally bring in Willard, and now they have Robinson in jail. They have Willard in jail. Robinson saying Willard was the perpetrator. Willard is saying Robinson's the perpetrator. And Willard's wife, who I guess had been married and divorced from him 2 or 3 different times, finally is told by their attorney that they need to basically return the money to get a lighter sentence because of the murder and everything. Their attorney at this time is F. Lee Bailey, of all people. To make things further more difficult, F. Lee Bailey, Willard says, told him to go back out, dig up the money, and rebury it in a safer place where nobody knows where it's at, because until we make a deal, we need to make sure nobody finds the money. Unfortunately, when he went to go rebury it, he basically did that not far from where they'd actually buried it. Willard's ex-wife, current wife, whatever she is, she realizes she's aiding and abetting in fleeing, but she actually had nothing to do with the actual robbery, but she has a lot of information. So they cut her a deal. She tells them where the cash is, where they went out and buried it. It says, we took a number of boxes, we wrote our names on the boxes. There's information on there to identify it, but they're buried in these spots. They go out, they cannot find any of those boxes. They do find a box with about $1.5 million, though, buried in a different spot that's unmarked. She says, that's not one of the boxes we buried. So they're thinking Willard went out and was moving the boxes around. Getting the box, they go to court. Willard is sentenced to lifetime imprisonment for the murder and then a number of other counts. I think there's like 10 or 12 counts on him. However, Robinson, because he claims that Willard was the one that shot Marjorie Jackson, he said he didn't really have much to do with it. He just was there to help him out. He is actually, and probably because he turned evidence and testified against Willard, he's basically put in jail for about 10 years for his being an accomplice to the fact of what happened. They got most of the money they say they had. Now, Robinson would later tell people, because he got out of prison, and he said there was still more money. They did not get all what he had. You do the math here, because they say there was this much, and there was supposed to be 15 to 20 million that she'd taken out of the bank, and it doesn't quite add up, obviously. So Robinson said there was more money, but he got caught doing something else and ended up in prison again. I do not know his whereabouts. Willard went to prison, pretty much, far as I know, didn't really say much else about the case. He tried to appeal the case for unlawful warrants and certain things. They obviously had the sequence of the numbers and found every bit of cash that he had hidden at the house in the RV. Even what was buried showed those notes, so it showed it was that money. It's about 20 miles just off the I-17, buried in probably a wash, but it was said it was buried in sand. Now, the FBI Freedom of Information Act, the FBI files were released and someone got them. Several pages are missing. They said it was very odd that once that file was released, the individual that got it said there were pages that were not released. They were gone. He questioned the FBI. They said they didn't know. He also found that one agent's name was all through the report. All the others were redacted. He thought that might be because that FBI agent, was under investigation for some reason. The rumor is that an FBI agent found several million and might have gotten away with it. He followed it up with this individual's name. That individual ended up having millions of dollars transferred into a Swiss bank account. It was laundered, and he ended up buying a lot of real estate in Arizona worth millions of dollars. So it's thought that he might have found some of the other boxes in the desert. But the FBI said there was plenty of money unaccounted for. The Freedom of Information Act files showed that, and those reports. The court reports show that there was a lot of questionable action on everyone's part, as no one could come up with an exact amount. Obviously a perfect situation, because Marjorie withdrew a certain amount of money. The bank tried to say it's this amount, and the amounts didn't add up. Unfortunately, even with the Freedom of Information Act, the court files and everything else, it's very vague. The Safari RV park was on the north side of Phoenix along the I-17. They were about 20 miles north of Phoenix. You could figure somewhere out towards New River, Black Canyon City. And they buried the cash out there somewhere in the sand, because that is the only description of when they retrieved the sand. The boxes were that they were deep, about 5 feet deep in sand. which makes it very difficult, 5 feet deep. So, according to Willard's wife, there was quite a number of boxes. So she was puzzled too, is that they didn't get that, but I've never found any other further follow-up interviews. Now, Willard died in 1987. He was still in prison. He had a heart attack and passed away, so there's no further mention of anything on him. But it's very, very interesting story, Marjorie Jackson. And additionally, besides the presents to God, there were cakes. They said the table was set for Jesus and God to come over and have meals with her, and she would bake birthday cakes and so forth and put Jesus and God on them. So very eccentric, religiously eccentric, but the craziest part of all of it is she'd several times come before a judge and was found competent. They said she was very competent and very aware of things. They said her religious beliefs did not interfere with her ability to discern and understand reality. So unfortunately for Marjorie, her forgive and forget did catch up with her. There's been no news. I've not seen anything, but I found it a most enthralling, interesting story. And since the Freedom of Information Act, who knows what's probably something specific to where things were buried in the FBI files. The information could still be out there. It could have been destroyed. Someone knows something. Someone could go and follow up. I didn't find it wide-ranging story, but there was a number of things on the court case, including Willard's trial, and notes on that I was able to look up. And so if you're out there and you just happen to find something, they're in a wash or ravine, or look at, there possibly is up to $4 to $6 million still buried 20 miles north of Phoenix in currency. And even if it is the sequential numbers and so forth there would be a reward, I would think, offered by the FBI or the bank or someone. So there you go, the story of Marjorie Jackson. Very interesting story, I thought. A little different than our normal Chasing Legends. But I thought it needed to be said. You know, I found it a little change of pace in the files, which is always interesting. And it tied in Indiana to Arizona, a number of different things. So there you go. That's the story, the whole complete story. Thank you for watching us. Thank you for joining live on Fridays. And thank you for continuing to watch our this day in the Superstition Mountains. We will continue those through the end of the year. Then our plan is for next year, rather than be redundant, would be to expand upon those headlines of those stories. That's what we're giving you, headlines of things that happened or were reported that day. Next year, we will take some of the better ones we get comments on that people like, what's the rest of the story? We will do 4 or 5 minute videos kind of encapsulating that, maybe longer form if they suggest otherwise. So there you go. That'll take a lot of work, a lot of research, and a lot of looking up, but we're planning on doing that this summer to prepare for those for next year. So thank you for watching. Thank you, everyone, for your loyalty and everything and joining us on the lives. Great questions this last Friday. Always join us at 4 p.m. Arizona time for the lives. Until then, always remember, I'm Wayne Tuttle. You're not. And this was Chasing Legends.